In the 1990s, Peru was experiencing one of its darkest times. Fear ran through the streets, and hope seemed to be fading. The country was facing a deep economic crisis, and the Shining Path terrorist group was spreading terror throughout the country. Amid the chaos and distrust of traditional politicians, a new name emerged: Alberto Fujimori, an unknown university professor who promised to clean up corruption, end terrorism, and restore stability to the country. For many, Fujimori represented hope, but for others, it was the beginning of a long shadow over Peruvian democracy. Alberto Fujimori came to power in 1990, winning the elections against Mario Vargas Llosa. His image was that of a humble man of Japanese origin who claimed to understand the people. He promised to govern with honesty, austerity, and a firm hand. Initially, his government implemented harsh economic measures, known as the Fuji shock, which stabilized inflation but also severely affected the poorest population. Meanwhile, his fight against terrorism won him popular support. However, behind the rhetoric of order and progress, a change was brewing that would mark Peru's political history. On April 5, 1992, Fujimori dissolved Congress, intervened in the judiciary, and seized control of the media. He argued that it was necessary to reorganize the nation to defeat corruption and terrorism. But the world called it what it truly was: a self-coup. From that moment on, power was concentrated in his hands. Freedoms were curtailed, the press was censored, and the opposition silenced. The country entered a new era, that of authoritarianism disguised as democracy. During those years, repression grew increasingly severe. While the government boasted economic and military achievements, thousands of people were victims of abuses, forced disappearances, and extrajudicial executions. Among the most memorable cases are the Barrios Altos and La Cantuda massacres, where innocent people lost their lives at the hands of the Colina Group, a secret military squad under the regime's orders. Fujimori justified his actions as part of the fight against terrorism, but the cost was the systematic violation of human rights. The families of the victims demanded justice, but for years they only encountered silence, fear, and censorship. In the late 1990s, corruption scandals began to come to light. The so-called Vladivideos, recordings by presidential advisor Vladimiro Montesinos, showed how the government bought off media outlets, politicians, and judges to stay in power. In 2000, after the evidence became public, Fujimori fled the country and resigned by fax from Japan. But the story didn't end there. Years later, he was extradited, tried and convicted of corruption, kidnapping, and human rights violations. The man who promised to save Peru ended up being remembered as one of the most controversial and authoritarian rulers in its history. Today, decades later, Fujimori's name continues to divide the country. Some remember him as the president who defeated terrorism and stabilized the economy. Others as the one responsible for destroying democracy and sowing fear. Peru's history still bears the wounds of that time. And the question remains: was Fujimori the savior Peru needed, or the nightmare it never escaped?